But I am about to introduce to you today's keynote speaker, Mr. Andrew Gillum. Now, some of you are probably saying to yourself, who is Andrew Gillum? Is he from Peoria? Where's he from? Who is he? Well, that's why I'm here, because I got your back. I am going to tell you who he is. Not only that, I'll tell you what he has accomplished so far in his young life, but also how he's faced adversity to make a name for himself in the great state of Florida and beyond this great country of ours. I'll tell you how he followed the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to pursue accomplishments African Americans at one point could not even dream of pursuing. Mr. Andrew Gillum is a Democratic politician who ran for a seat on the Tallahassee City Commission at the age of 23 and won. He held that seat from 2003 until 2014 as a very young man. But he didn't stop there, ladies and gentlemen. From 2014 until 2018, he served as the 126th mayor of Tallahassee, Florida. He was the 6th African American to hold that elected position. But Andrew's aspirations were even higher than that. He set his eyes on the governor's chair. In March of 2017, Gillum announced his candidacy for Florida's governor as the Democratic nominee to run against Republican candidate Ron DeSantis. That gubernatorial race was so tight it made the news here in Peoria and beyond, all over the United States. A machine recount was needed because it was that tight of a race, but the Republican candidate was declared the winner. And like many races, that one was filled with racial controversy and other pitfalls that will test a candidate's patience. And all you elected officials out there know, when it comes to testing your patience, sometimes it will be tested. We've all been there. Some of us have had our patience tested today, maybe with the kids, or the dog, or the cat, or the mailman not running today. You name it, it probably happened. But anyway, through it all, Andrew Gillum remained a professional. So here's the question. Who is Andrew Gillum? That's what I asked you in the very beginning of this. Andrew Gillum is a man who wants to expand Medicaid to 700,000 people who right now do not have access to health care. Who is Andrew Gillum? He is a man who supports the $15 minimum wage. Who is Andrew Gillum? Andrew Gillum is a man who opposes Florida's stand your ground law. Who is Andrew Gillum? A man like Martin Luther King Jr. who had a dream and is not afraid to make that dream a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andrew Gillum.
Very much. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Peoria. I tell you one thing, I am from Florida, and I typically take a little bit of credit for bringing warm weather wherever I go. Today, I will take credit for the sunshine, but y'all get all the credit for the temperatures. I stepped off the plane last night without my coat on because we had been through many airports and traveled through a couple of cities on yesterday. And I will tell you, I had a very quick thought about getting back on that plane and getting out of here. But all of that cold has been overcompensated by the warmth that I have felt by every single person that I have encountered, beginning with the chairwoman of this event and this organization, Ms. Alma Brown. Will y'all please give it up for Alma? And I mean, the woman is tireless. My flight got delayed a couple of times, and I certainly did not expect to be greeted upon my arrival by her, but she was there with a smiling face. I wish she had a coat with her, but, you know, only her own. I'm joking. welcoming me right to this city. And while I'm in the spirit of thanking Miss Ulmer, the founder, one of the founders of this event, I also want to quickly acknowledge the public employees for community concern, as well as the organizers who helped pull this event to get together. Will you please give them a round of applause? Mayor Jim Artis, very, very good to be with you and with the members of the City Council here. I've met state legislators, judges, the superintendent, and other public officials. You all, even when you may not politically agree or align on party affiliation or political philosophy, I don't know about you, but I believe very much so in prayer. And I think we ought to pray for our leaders. Even if it isn't in alignment with our vision, maybe we pray for their wisdom. Even if they don't share our political party, maybe we pray that they will have a heart for those of us who have differences. Listen, if Nancy Pelosi can do it, I know we can do it. I know we can do it. And so our prayers and well wishes obviously go up for our political leaders, that they have right and sound judgment and see all of us with decency and with humanity. I want to join in congratulating Brother Sean Livingston, his beautiful wife Joanna, their two beautiful kids and their family. This is a man, y'all, who has not forgotten where he came from. And not just in words, but through deeds. A brother who's given $1 million to his former high school, someone who comes back and pours his wisdom and life experiences back into this community. Now, I have been places that have had Barack Obama Street, Martin Luther King Drive, and now I'm proud to have visited a city that has its own Sean Livingston Way. Congratulations, brother. And I want to thank you all, the VVIPs of the room, the folks who live in this community every day, get to call it home, and hopefully are in your own ways contributing to the continuation of Dr. King's dream as you make your little small corner of the world a better place. I got to tell you, my route here has been a bit circuitous, and I don't mean just the physical route to getting to this place, but really over the arc of my life. A lot of folks would have counted me down and out. I'm from Miami, Florida originally, born and raised partially there. Didn't grow up in a family that had college as a tradition in our household, not even high school graduation, to be quite frank with you. I remember the very, very moment that I decided that I was going to commit myself to wanting to go to college. In fact, I knew exactly which college I was going to attend. The school of my choice, even though I am now a Florida A&M University Rattler, and I haven't been to Peoria before, so I don't know if there are any Rattlers in the house, but there are some. This is good. Definitely one over there, and I think I see one or two back there. But Florida A&M University obviously is my alma mater. But I've got to admit, even in the presence of my two Rattler friends that are here in Peoria, that FAMU was not my first choice for college. In fact, my first choice for college was this little-known school called Hillman. Now, some of y'all know about Hillman. Hillman, some of y'all don't know about Hillman, too. Hillman was this small school that was popularized by a little-known TV show called A Different World. Shout out to our 90s TV watchers. But I had not been introduced to an HBCU before, which is a historically black college or university. I had not really been exposed to people who looked like me, who were, as I saw projected on the big screen through Hillman College, Jaleesa and Wayne and Whitley Gilbert. And when I saw those folks, I knew I was going to Hillman College. I set my sights on going to college, and I say this sincerely. I matriculated through elementary and middle and high school, and I even remember sitting down to take my SAT scores, and back then you used to have to fill in this bubble that corresponded to the schools that you wanted your SAT scores to be sent to. So I went through the manual of schools, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, going all the way through, scouring the H's, obviously looking for Hillman College. only to see that Hillman College was not among the list of universities where you could send your school scores, SAT scores to. And so, like any indignant and proud young person, I took my form to my guidance counselor protesting that I had a defective form. At which time she promptly told me that Hillman College existed only on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. in a different world. Suffice it to say, I found my Hillman College at the Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. And I'm thankful because I still believe that a good education is still the best disruptor in American society of being able to disrupt generational poverty. I'm extremely proud of the opportunity to be educated by good public education school teachers and the like. But today, as we stand here, to commemorate the life and celebrate the life of a great human being, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man who stood tall, a man who, even as I stand here before you today, I'm reminded that I am older than Dr. King was at the time of his death. 40 years old. Dr. King was untimely taken from us at the age of 39. I'm deeply reminded of that as I think about the fact, as a reminder to the fact that at a young age, this man had already changed the world. Now, Dr. King was not a very popular man during his time, during his life on earth. In fact, was considered by the government of the United States to be a threat to the United States of America. Today, I'm proud to say we lift him up and we celebrate him, but not just for reflections on history, but to bring that history forward, to be taught and guided by the sacrifices that were made before us that allow us to sit in a room, grand room like this, and such a diverse audience. This future that Dr. King envisioned for us was grounded in Dr. King's words of 1957 on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, in a speech that he entitled, "Give Us the Ballot." By this time, the Brown v. Board of Education decision had already been decided. Thanks to the sacrifices of so many people of color, the doors of opportunity and access to many of the public establishments that were previously closed to people of color were knocked open, and the last remaining vestige of segregation in this country still had yet to be decided, and that was true and unfettered and unmitigated access to the franchise, the right to vote. The future that Dr. King talked about, that he envisioned for us, said that with the great opportunity to vote, that it presented a great beacon of light of hope to millions of disinherited people throughout the world who had already only dared to dream of freedom. He said, "Give us the ballot, and we will place judges on the benches of the South who will judge justly and love mercy, and who will place at the head of Southern states governors who have felt not only the tang of the human, but the glow of the divine." For me, as I think about the words of Dr. King, I can't help but to reflect on my own personal story. Now, unlike many of that age, at least as they retell the story, everybody I knew marched with Dr. King. But the truth is that very few people actually marched in those moments with Dr. King. And like most Black Americans of the day, my parents and my grandparents didn't march with Dr. King. They didn't know Dr. King. They didn't go to Washington, D.C. They didn't sit at any lunch counters, not in Greensboro or anywhere across the South. They didn't line up at the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. But they made sure that even I, as a young person, was fully aware of our great heroes and sheroes who took those actions, who made those sacrifices. I learned from my mother, who was a school bus driver, and my daddy, who was a construction worker, all of the important hallmarks of history. And when I think about my mother in the historical context and her work even as a bus driver, to compare that to what was happening to the Civil Rights Movement, you think about people who get on the bus just trying to go about their merry way, to get to work or to school, and to be able to do so with dignity, and to be able to choose to sit in the front of the bus if they so choose. I think about my father, a construction worker, and the construction workers of that day, many of whom built doors and walls and infrastructures that they themselves could not enter. I think of Dr. King's words when he says, let's build dikes of courage to hold back the flood of fear. I don't know about here in Peoria, but there's lots of fear all across the country. And the good news is that Dr. King gave us a blueprint on how to deal with it. He said to lean into our courage. That said, my mother and father and grandparents made sure that I took advantage of every single opportunity that was created through the civil rights movement. They told me not only to walk through those doors that were open for me, but to kick open some other doors so that others could walk through them, to pass it on, to lift as we climbed. That, they said, was the debt that I owed to those who came before me, the giants upon whose shoulders who we stand. And the beauty about these individuals, these foot soldiers for justice, these foot soldiers for a better future for all of us, is that even in the moment that they were doing this hard work and labor, risking their life, their livelihoods, blood, sweat, and tears, is that they didn't even know if they would ever be able to be the benefactors of their sacrifice. Isn't that something? Isn't it amazing to be so selfless, to put it all on the line, even if you yourself won't be the benefactor of what it is that you're sacrificing for? My grandmother told me, my grandmother who was a mother to 16, I heard the moans. They grew up in Georgia, that was called workforce. My grandmother didn't have a formal education, but I gotta tell you, she was the wisest woman that I know. My grandmother, as a kid, because my mama and daddy would have to get up so early and get off to work, they would load all of us into one car and drive us just a short distance down the street to my grandmama and granddaddy's house, where we would sleep just a little bit longer before they would get us up and ready for the day. And my grandmother would perform what I would call 2 rituals before she would let us cross the threshold of the door. The first ritual she would perform is she would take her bottle of olive oil. She called it blessing oil, but it's oil you can get off the shelf, right? Her blessing oil. And she would take that bottle of blessing oil, AKA olive oil, and twist that little top off and dip it over into one finger and take that residue oil and build a cross across my forehead. Some of y'all may have had a grandmama like mine. It was her way of sending me out into the day with a blessing that no harm would come my way. And then she would recite what I would call a bit of a mantra. She would say, boy, go to school. Mind your teachers. Get your lesson. And one day bring that education home. She would say, bring that education home for your little brother and your little sister who don't know what an education is. She said, bring it home for that little boy down the street that you play with, because God knows where he gonna end up. She was right. His name was Tyrone. Tyrone was always in trouble. No offense to any of the Tyrones in the room, but if you're here, you carry a heavy burden. She said, bring it home for your mama and your daddy, who get up every single day to go out there and slave on somebody else's job in order to keep a roof over your head and clothes on your back and food on the table. Bring it home. Now, I got to tell you, I didn't always know what my grandmother was communicating to me in those moments, but what I would come to learn is similar to the words of Dr. King. What she was telling us is that we were all in this thing together. If I went far in life, we would all go far in life. That was a sentiment amongst our community, but that wasn't a sentiment that just ended there. That was the words of Dr. King when he talked about us being caught up in this inextricably separate, right? We couldn't separate one another in this movement if the dream was going to become real. There were bonds, strong bonds that were built then. These were the same bonds that got our family through, over and under and around some difficult times. These were the bonds that got us through, and my older 4 brothers, all of which had criminal background records, right? Set an example for me, if nothing else, to stay out of trouble, and created a path for me to be able to be the first of my 6 siblings to go to college, and to see my little brother and little sister come behind me and do the same thing. You can't tell us we don't know what it means to see intergenerational poverty disrupted thanks to a good public education. That's a shout out to public education. It's a shout out to public education. But I got to tell you to fast forward that then on election night, 2018, November, as I stood on the steps of Florida A&M University, hoping to give a victory speech, I couldn't help but reflect on my grandmother and think that somewhere along the line I may have let her down. I looked out at the crowd that night, the people who had given so much, the people who I consider really lose when we lose these elections, the dedicated people who get up every day just going to work trying to make a way for themselves and their families, the people who had given days and weeks and months and years to help me to become governor of the state of Florida. I looked at that crowd from all walks of life who devoted themselves countlessly to our effort. The loss hurt. I wouldn't be honest if I didn't say every now and again, it still hurts. My mama still's like, baby, you won. I'm like, yes, in your mind, and that's okay. But the truth is that I realized that the legacy of that campaign was never going to be defined just by who won or who lost, by the precincts that we won or lost, or who came out necessarily on top. At the end of that night, more than 4 million Floridians from all across my state, every corner, black, white, rich, poor, young and young at heart, showed up to support my campaign because we all believed in the possibility of something better. Not for some, but for all of us. And I got to tell you today, Peoria, I still do believe. Just as no one bad day at school, no one bad grade, no one bad encounter with a teacher could stop me from bringing home an education to my grandmother, no one election decided by less than 1/2% should stop me or any of us for bringing home the future that our children deserve. As Frederick Douglass said, there is no progress without struggle. And that's the story of the civil rights movement. I dare say that that's the story of America. Progress born of struggle, resilience in the face of adversity. On that election night, record-breaking turnout came out in the state of Florida. Our campaign may have come up short on the numbers, but that very same night, our state decided by 65% to allow former felons to have their right to vote and participate in our democracy. These are people who had not voted in decades, if they had ever voted at all. But guess what? In November of 2020, we're going to make sure that their voices are heard in that election and in beyond. That victory, the victory on that issue showed me that progress is possible, but that it doesn't necessarily come overnight. Those victories don't come overnight, that they require us to get up and to reassert ourselves every single day. You see, the mandate of 2020 is that we not only have a historical remembrance as we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King, our legacy this year has to be that we adopt his philosophy of the fierce urgency of now. And I'm not sure that there is a more urgent moment in our country than the moment that we find ourselves. And so we want to turn this holiday in his words and the statutes that are built to memorialize him into a different kind of memorial. And that memorial may be, for all of us who have the right and the opportunity to vote, the ballot. The promissory note that Dr. King talked about in 1957, his speech, The Power of the Ballot, came to fruition a number of years later through the Voting Rights Act. And we should value the ballot and the sacrifices that it took us to get there. And every day in Michigan and in Florida and in Georgia and Ohio and in cities and states all across the country, we're still fighting to make the voting acts real. A year ago, the Illinois State Board of Elections did the right thing. They decided to leave the controversial cross-check voter database, which is a scheme undertaken across states at voter suppression. And we're still fighting today to ensure that the 1965 Voting Rights Act remains accessible and real. You all are doing the right thing here. Dr. King said it the best. He said, the only thing I have to say to America is be true to what you said on paper, to be true to the voter registration card, to be true to the voter rolls, and to give us the ballot. Give us the ballot is not just a history lesson, y'all. It is a call to action. You heard Brother Clyburn talk about it. I would equate the ballot to the promissory note that Dr. King talked about. The promissory note being the right to vote, and guess what? In 2020, that promissory note, that note is still due. Not just here in Illinois, but in Florida and Georgia and Texas and Wisconsin and all the states that help to constitute this union. Because the life of Dr. King and the lessons of the movement have taught us that we cannot roll over and just give up. Can you imagine what it would have meant if Dr. King would have just walked away? They don't want me here. I'm not publicly popular. I got the president, the intelligence forces of this country against me. Aren't you proud that Rosa Parks didn't just give up? Yes, sir. That she decided that she was going to sit down so that we could stand up? Aren't you proud of those 4 mothers and 4 fathers who decided to be impatient, who decided to take up the fierce urgency of now and make it mean something? Well, maybe the words of those individuals don't resonate with everybody, so maybe I'll just quote the bar of Cardi B. I'm not sure how many of y'all have had Cardi B quoted in this center, but don't attribute all her raps to me, but just a few of them. Cardi B said that you can knock us down 9 times, but we gonna get back up 10. All right? Now what Cardi B was communicating to us is that you don't just roll over and let people take advantage of you. If folks are working this hard to keep you away from the ballot, then they must know something. They must be terrified of something. They must know the power that you possess when we decide to show up and to show out and vote like our lives depend on it, because guess what? Our lives do depend on what we do. The question still then is, what are we standing up and fighting for? Well, the first thing that we ought to recognize in this great hall, with this great diversity of people, is that many of us want the very same things for ourselves and for our families. Whether you're white, black, or brown, rich or poor, working class, suburban, urban, or otherwise, many of us want the very, very same things for our families. We want an economy that works for everybody. We want jobs where your work equal more than the wages that you take off that job, where your work actually equals dignity. You know what it means to have dignity in work? It means to be able to earn enough to take care of yourself and your family, and maybe have enough left over to take a vacation every once in a while. And that shouldn't be too much to ask in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. We want dignity in our work. We want schools that work for our children. We want schools that don't build pipelines to prison, but pipelines to prosperity, where our children can show up and be educated and be poured into, to have the ability, based off of what's poured into them, to make the best of their own future based off of their own will and sheer work. We want an education system where teachers are paid what they are worth for doing the most difficult job that exists on earth, the shaping, the molding, the inspiring, the cultivating of the minds of our most precious gifts, our children. Y'all, we want a court system that is truly racially and economically blind, where you don't walk into a courtroom and your destiny is already decided because of the way you look, the color of your skin, the block you come from, the neighborhood you grew up in. We want a system of justice that is fair and that is balanced and that is designed to restore. That once you've done your crime and you've done the time and you've paid your debt to society, you ought to be able to re-enter society and make the best of yourself and for your family. That's the vision and the trueness of Dr. King's dream. That's how we make it real in today's society. Y'all, we want a healthcare system where people aren't terrified to get sick. Terrified to get sick. Because when you get sick, you can't go to work. And when you don't go to work, you don't earn a wage. And when you don't earn a wage, you can't pay your bills. And when you don't pay your bills, something gets cut off. Now, we may think that simply because we may have a limousine model insurance policy that these issues don't impact us. Getting back to this inextricably tied. Well, you do realize that every time these individuals who are uninsured show up in an emergency room to get life-saving care and maintenance and care, that when your premiums in your insurance policy are increasing year over year after year, yet you are healthy, that you're assuming the costs that are in the system. And so don't confuse the fact that we are all in this thing together. We want, that's all right, applaud for yourselves being in this thing together. So many of the issues get talked about in the cable news, and I know it because I'm a culprit of it as well. They don't make all that much sense when it comes to the bread and butter issues that we're confronting every day in our own communities, at our own dining room tables. We want safe communities where our kids can go to school and not have to worry about whether or not your kid will come home dead or alive. We want safe environments where common sense gun reform doesn't upset the Second Amendment, but it gives protection to all of us to live, breathe, play, go to work, go to church, go to synagogue, and not have to worry about whether or not our safety is at stake. Y'all, our schools, our jobs, our healthcare, our economy, our courts, our safety, these are our kitchen table issues. And our failure to address them in the shadows of Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy, because the legacy isn't about just reflecting on the past, it's about addressing the issues that confront us right now today and making it better for the future. If we don't address these issues, they will linger on for the next generation to come. When Dr. King went down to Birmingham to organize, you will recall that he wrote from a letter from Birmingham jail as he was confronted by white ministers in the South who said they didn't want an agitator, an outsider, coming in and disrupting things. Dr. King wrote from that letter from Birmingham jail that we're all in this thing together and that the time is right to do what's right. That it is untimely and unwise, they said, for Dr. King to be there, this outsider. But Dr. King didn't respond to those words of insult with indignation. He responded with eloquence and with humility and humanity and resolution and resilience. He said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He said, whatever affects one of us directly affects all of us indirectly. What we've learned about Peoria is that some of the first black residents in the late 1700s settled near Liberty Street. That's the great name because it sounds like one of those promissory notes that Dr. King talks so much about. Through liberty is our right. We still have to struggle to claim that liberty. Let us never forget your local bus boycott in 1963 that was victorious after 1 week of protests. Y'all do know down in the South, it took over a year for the bus boycott to be settled. So one thing that I know about Peoria is it don't take y'all long to learn. That's good news. And the other better news about your bus service, it was the second bus to arrive in Washington, D.C. for the March on Washington. Your buses right here out of Peoria. I can imagine the people showing up that day who were witnesses to history then. Well, let's not make them footnotes in history. Let's not just make them historical facts, y'all. I'm challenging Peoria today to continue to lead from the front. Set an example. You can be small and mighty. You can be the ones that help to remind us that our children and their lives actually come first. What we do for those who will come behind us. That's what Dr. King knew. That's what the foot soldiers for justice knew. We've got to bring Dr. King's vision alive. And so how do we do it in the context of making sure that every single person and every single vote counts? Well, you can dedicate yourself right now, beyond this day, to registering as many people to vote as you can encounter. And you can begin with your own family first. Your mama, your brother, your sister, your cousins, and them. Oh, I'm not in the South, and them is not a thing here. I'll rephrase, and them, including the cousins you hate talking to. We want to commit to bringing all those individuals to the polls. The data shows us that the best indicator you get for a person voting is for the people who they trust and love, encouraging them to vote. Commercials of millions and $1 billion on television don't do it, but you, organizing right at your own dinner table, can help change the outcome of an election. Let's commit ourselves to helping the mayor and the city council and your elected leadership to addressing crime and blight. What does it mean to turn communities into prosperous places where everybody is treated equally with dignity and with respect? Y'all, Dr. King said it best. He said, let's build bridges, not walls. Immigration is on the ballot. Dr. King said, science investigates, religion interprets, science gives man knowledge, which is power, religion gives man wisdom, which is control. Science deals mainly with facts, religion deals mainly with values, and the two are not rivals. I don't know about your belief system, but climate change is on the ballot. Don't believe me, keep living. Dr. King said the function of education is to teach, and one, to think intensely and to think critically. Intelligence plus character is the goal of true education. Public education is on the ballot, Peoria. Dr. King said that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort or convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. Yes, decency in the American way is on the ballot. Dr. King said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. Ladies and gentlemen, freedom and our democracy is on the ballot. But most importantly, I believe that the future for our children and our children's children and our children's children's children is on the ballot. The Maasai people put it this way. The Maasai were an incredible East African village who were known over the arc of history of demonstrating excellence in all things. They were excellent hunters and gatherers. They were excellent warriors. Men and women stood an average height of 6 feet or taller. But the Maasai were also known for something else that was pretty profound, simple, but prophetic. Every time a fellow Maasai came to greet one another, they would greet each other with a simple and again profound greeting. And that greeting simply was, and how are the children? And how are the children? And how are the children? Because they are a society that understood that how well society was set up to do, how well our communities were set up to do, was going to be measured by how well it was set up for the children. Wouldn't it be something if we asserted ourselves and our regular actions to being about creating a better pathway for the children? Not just mine, not just yours, but society's children. Y'all, we're inextricably linked in this thing. And all I can tell you in the words of my grandmother, Ella Baker Jackson, not the famous one, but the one that's famous to me, is Peoria, we got to bring this thing home, November 2020. Let's bring it home. God bless you, and happy MLK Day. Thank you.